The Galactic Concord's Central Hospital was the largest medical facility in this entire spiral arm of the galaxy. Its endless white corridors glowed with soft light that never dimmed, designed to comfort every species who walked inside. Machines hummed with a quiet rhythm, translating vital signs from thousands of patients whose biology was as different as stars in the sky. Among the staff was Zritha, a nurse from the aquatic world of Shiraku. Her body was tall and slender, with skin that shimmered faintly like polished glass. She had been trained in xenomedicine for many years and had seen creatures with lungs like bellows, hearts that beat in pulses of light, and blood made not of liquid, but of powdered crystal. She thought she was prepared for anything. But today she was assigned a species she had only read about in medical texts: a human. Humans were still rare in the Concord. They had only joined the interstellar community a few decades ago. Most aliens whispered of them as fragile, small bones, soft skin, organs that required careful balance of oxygen and water. Many believed humans could not survive long outside their native world, a dangerous blue-green planet called Earth. Zritha held her data slate close as she walked to the ward. Her tendrils curled in nervousness. The slate displayed the humans. Record name: Commander Ellis Vera. Species: human, Homo sapiens. Status: stable, recovering from minor field accident condition, arm trauma, localized swelling. Swelling. Zritha whispered the word in her own tongue. To her species, swelling meant only one thing: organs breaking down, fluids escaping, death approaching. On Shiraku, any sign of swelling meant the body had failed. It was always fatal. Her heartbeat crystals pulsed faster as she entered the ward. The patient was there, Commander Ellis. Compared to most of the towering alien patients in the hospital, he looked so small. He sat upright on the bed, his skin pale but healthy. His arm, however, caught Zritha's eyes immediately. It was larger than before. The limbs seemed to puff outward, stretching the skin tight. Zritha's breath caught in panic. She quickly adjusted her scanner, the device floating at her side with a soft whir. The readings were unusual. No failing heart, no spreading infection, no rapid tissue death. But the arm continued to expand. Her training screamed at her. "This is catastrophic. Patient is entering terminal phase." Zritha cried out, her voice echoing down the corridor. Other staff turned toward her, startled by the panic. Ellis looked up, confused. His expression was calm, almost amused, though sweat glistened on his brow. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. His voice carried that strange human roughness, a texture like stone against silk. "Your limb is enlarging," Zritha said, her tendrils trembling. "The swelling indicates critical collapse. I must prepare the stasis chamber at once." Ellis tilted his head, his eyes curious rather than frightened. "Collapse? No, that's not it. It's just swelling." Zritha's hand shook. "Just swelling? You are losing balance. If we do not cut the limb and seal the wound, your life is—" The words stuck in her throat. She almost said over. That was the truth on her world. But the human's calm expression made her hesitate. Ellis leaned back slightly, his lips curling into the faintest smile. "Relax. This isn't dangerous. I've had this happen plenty of times before." Zritha froze. Plenty of times? How could that be possible? On Shiraku, one case of swelling meant the end. No one returned from it. Other medical staff were already rushing in, hearing the alarm. A tall insectoid physician clicked its mandibles in alarm. "What is happening? The human's limb is distorting." Zritha turned desperately to her colleagues. "We must operate immediately. Look at it. This is spreading." But Ellis raised his good hand. "Stop. You don't understand. This isn't death. This is healing." The entire room fell silent. Zritha's mind spun in confusion. Healing. How could a body expand as a way to heal? That was impossible. Swelling meant corruption, fluid escaping, organs bursting. And yet, the scanner still showed strong heart rhythm, steady breathing, and oxygen levels perfectly balanced. She leaned closer, scanning again. desperate to find the hidden failure. But there was none. The swelling was localized, controlled, precise. Ellis watched her, his eyes patient. "You're scared because in your people this means something bad, right?" Zaretha nodded slowly, unable to form words. "For humans," Ellis explained gently, "swelling is often the body's way of protecting itself. It's not collapse. It's a defense. My body is sending extra blood and fluid to this arm. It's making a cushion while it repairs itself. It hurts, sure, but it's not fatal." His words sank into Zaretha like stones sinking into water. A defense? Could it truly be? She had studied xenobiology for years, memorized countless emergency symptoms for dozens of species. But nothing prepared her for this idea, that a sign of doom in one species could be a sign of survival in another. Her tendrils twitched nervously as she reviewed the scanner's numbers again. No infection, no organ breakdown, no spreading poison, just the arm, expanding with purpose. Ellis chuckled softly at her hesitation. "I can tell you don't believe me, but trust me, this is normal. I fell once on Earth, twisted my ankle, swelled up just like this. In a few days it went back to normal." The staff exchanged uncertain looks. The insectoid physician tapped its mandibles in thought. If this is true, then human biology operates on principles unfamiliar to us. Ellis shrugged lightly. "That's humans for you. We look fragile, but we're tougher than you think." Zaretha stood frozen between fear and wonder. She had entered the room convinced her patient was dying. Yet here he was, calmly explaining that the very thing she feared was actually proof of survival. Her mind replayed the last few minutes, her panic, her alarm, her desperate call for surgery. She felt a flush of embarrassment ripple through her shimmering skin. She had been ready to harm the patient, to save him from something that was never a threat. Ellis noticed her silence and softened his tone. "Don't feel bad. You couldn't have known. Humans are different. Even we don't fully understand ourselves sometimes." Zaretha lowered her eyes. In all her years, she had prided herself on her calm under pressure, her ability to react with logic and knowledge. But this moment shattered that pride. She realized how little she truly knew of the species now sitting before her, smiling even as his body swelled. She thought, perhaps the galaxy is not divided between fragile and strong, but between what we understand and what we do not. The swelling continued, but no alarms rang from the scanner. Ellis leaned back against the bed, still calm, still steady. Around him the staff whispered in awe. For them, this was a revelation. A species whose biology used what others feared as a sign of life. And for Zaretha, it was only the beginning of a lesson that would change her forever. The alarm that Zaretha had triggered continued to flash a soft amber along the walls. Its gentle tone echoed down the long corridor, and soon the ward was filled with movement. Doctors, attendants, and nurses of many species hurried in, their bodies reflecting the diversity of the Concord. A towering reptilian physician ducked through the doorway, scales shimmering like polished emerald. An insectoid staff member clattered across the floor with sharp clicks of its legs. Two avian technicians swooped in, wings folding as they landed, neatly beside the bed. They all turned their eyes to the human patient. Commander Ellis sat calmly at the center of their attention, his arm resting on a cushion. To Zaretha, the swelling was still alarming. His flesh looked tight, stretched, unnatural. But Ellis's face showed no fear. His expression was relaxed, as if he were watching a mild storm through a window rather than experiencing a personal crisis. The reptilian physician hissed softly. "The human's limb is unstable. Why has surgery not begun?" Zaretha stiffened. I prepared for it, but the patient insists it is not critical. He claims swelling is part of their natural healing." "Impossible." The insectoid clicked, its antennae twitching in disbelief. "In every known biology, swelling means degeneration, collapse of systems. This cannot be survival." The avian technicians leaned closer, eyes glinting like polished gems. One of them whispered, Is this the reason humans are called unpredictable? Their bodies show death, yet they speak of life. Ellis raised his good hand in greeting, his tone light. You're all crowding me like I'm about to explode. I promise you I'm fine. It's just my body's way of fixing itself. His words startled the staff. Few patients ever spoke so casually in the middle of what appeared to be crisis. Many species faced with swelling would already be unconscious, or worse. Yet here the human sat, joking gently while surrounded by aliens who stared at him in disbelief. Zretha felt her tendrils tremble. She remembered the panic in her own voice when she had called for help. Now, seeing Ellis so calm, she wondered if she had overreacted. Still, the image of that expanding limb gnawed at her instincts. The reptilian physician leaned close, scanning Ellis's arm. Circulation normal, heart rate steady, oxygen intake efficient. Yet the limb continues to grow in volume. Explain, human. Ellis shrugged lightly, his shoulders moving with a casual rhythm. It's simple. When a part of our body gets injured, the immune system reacts. It sends more blood, more fluid to the area. That's what you're seeing. Swelling cushions. The injury protects it and starts the repair process. It looks scary, but it's not a death sentence, not for us. The insectoid tilted its head, mandibles clicking in confusion. But why would a body damage itself more in order to heal? Fluid increase creates pressure, instability. It seems inefficient. Ellis chuckled softly. I guess you could say, humans don't always look efficient from the outside, but it works. That pressure is part of what tells us to rest the injured part so we don't make it worse, the staff murmured among themselves. This explanation seemed like nonsense to them, yet none of their scanners contradicted his words. His vitals were not failing. His systems were not collapsing. The swelling remained contained, purposeful. Zretha swallowed her unease. She asked softly, You mean, this is normal? This is not the end? Ellis met her gaze with calm eyes. Exactly. I'm not fragile. None of us are, really. We just work differently than you expect. His words carried weight beyond the medical room. Around him, the staff began to look at each other with something more than confusion, something like awe, the whisper of fear and respect. As the minutes passed, more staff gathered in the corridor outside, peering in. News had spread quickly. The human was showing swelling but was not dying. It contradicted everything they had been taught. Some whispered with suspicion. Perhaps he is hiding the pain. Humans are said to be reckless. Maybe he does not admit his weakness. Others whispered with wonder. No. Perhaps this is their strength. They survive what we cannot. Zretha stood in the middle of these voices, her heart heavy with mixed feelings. Only an hour ago, she had believed humans were fragile. That was what the records said. That was what the lessons taught. But now she was watching with her own eyes a patient who should be collapsing, yet instead sat calmly, explaining the mysteries of his body, as if it were a simple classroom discussion. The reptilian physician finally stepped back, scales rippling with unease. I will record this phenomenon, but I still do not understand how such a process can exist. The galaxy is vast, but this challenges medical logic. Ellis smiled faintly. That's humans for you. We've been challenging logic since the day we started walking upright. His tone was light, but Zretha felt something beneath it. A quiet pride, not arrogant, but steady. A pride in his people's resilience. Zretha's reflection. When the crowd dispersed slightly, Zretha remained beside the bed. She could not leave yet. Her tendrils curled and uncurled as she struggled with her thoughts. Commander, she said quietly. When I first saw your arm, I was certain you were at death's edge. I almost forced an operation. If you had not spoken, I might have harmed you in trying to help. Ellis looked at her kindly. You reacted with the knowledge. You had. That's not a failure, it just means there's more to learn. His words eased her, though they also deepened her sense of responsibility. She realized how dangerous misunderstanding could be. If medical staff across the Concord treated humans by the rules of other species, they could easily make mistakes. Serious. Mistakes. Perhaps, Zretha said slowly, your kind should not be labeled fragile. Perhaps it is simply unfamiliar. Ellis nodded. That's all we've ever been to the galaxy. Unfamiliar. But once people understand us, they usually realize we're tougher than we look. For the first time, Zretha allowed herself to believe it. The shift in the ward later that day, as Ellis rested, the staff reviewed their findings. Reports were updated. The swelling was documented not as a sign of death, but as a potential human survival mechanism. The insectoid physician wrote a note in the central database. Warning: swelling in humans may represent protective healing, not terminal decline. The avian technicians practiced repeating the word swelling in their own language, attaching to it a new definition, not destruction, but defense. And Zretha sat silently at her console, recording her own reflection. She described the moment when her fear turned to understanding, when the patient's calm voice had steadied her panic. She admitted her error openly, because in doing so, she felt she was serving the greater truth. Across the ward, Ellis had fallen asleep, breathing softly. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, his injured arm still swollen but no longer alarming anyone. Around him, the once panicked staff now watched in quiet respect. The lesson taking root, that evening, when the hospital's artificial day shifted into soft night tones, Zretha returned once more to check on Ellis. She found him awake, gazing out the window at the city lights beyond. Can't sleep? She asked gently. He smiled. Not used to these glowing walls. On Earth, nights are dark. Stars shine brighter that way. Zretha hesitated, then spoke. Today you taught us something we did not expect. You turned panic into knowledge. I believe many here will remember this day. Ellis turned to her, his gaze thoughtful. I didn't do much. My body did what it always does. I just explained it. That explanation, Zretha said softly, may save lives in the future. Ellis chuckled. Then, I guess the swelling was worth it. Zretha blinked her large eyes, uncertain if that was humor. Then, slowly, she allowed herself a small ripple of laughter. It was the first time she had laughed with a human, and she realized the sound felt lighter than she expected. Closing of Part 2A, the night grew quiet. The panic of earlier seemed almost like a distant memory. The ward that had once been filled with alarm now held a kind of quiet wonder. The staff no longer saw Ellis as a fragile being clinging to life. They saw him as something else entirely, a creature whose body turned fear into strength, whose calm presence turned panic into learning. And Zretha, sitting by his side, realized that this was only the beginning. If something as simple as swelling could reveal such resilience, what other secrets might humanity hold? She did not know yet, but she felt certain that the galaxy was about to learn. The following morning, the hospital was calmer than it had been the day before. The amber alarms were gone, the lights in the ward glowed softly, and the staff moved about with quiet purpose. Yet, beneath the stillness, there was an energy in the air, a sense of curiosity that spread from one staff member to another like ripples in water. It was all because of one patient. Commander Ellis lay awake on his bed, his swollen arm resting carefully against a support cushion. Though the swelling still looked strange to the alien eyes that studied him, the fear was no longer there. Instead, doctors, nurses, and technicians from different species had begun to take turns visiting him, each hoping to learn more about the human body that refused to match their expectations. Zretha was there again, standing at Ellis's side, her glass-like skin catching the light as she made notes on her data slate. She had hardly slept. Her thoughts had circled endlessly around the moment when Ellis explained what swelling meant for humans. That one explanation had turned her panic into understanding, and she could not let go of the feeling that she had witnessed something far larger than one patient's recovery. Now, as Ellis sipped from a small hydration pack, she asked him carefully, "Commander, will you tell us more about how your people heal?" Ellis looked at her with mild surprise, then glanced around at the small group of staff who had gathered. There were the two avian technicians, wings folded neatly, the insectoid physician, standing tall with its antennae twitching, and even the reptilian doctor, who had initially doubted everything but now lingered in silent curiosity. He gave a small shrug. Sure, I don't mind. Humans are full of odd tricks. Swelling is only one of them. The human immune dance Zretha leaned forward eager. You said swelling is a defense, but how can pressure and expansion protect instead of destroy? Ellis smiled faintly. Think of it this way. Our body has a guard system, a group of tiny soldiers you can't see. When something threatens us, those soldiers rush to the area. They bring supplies with them. Blood, fluids, cells that fight infection. That rush makes the injured part swell. It's like the body is building a wall around the wound so nothing worse can get in. The insectoid physician clicked in astonishment. You mean your own body creates an army within itself? It does not wait for outside treatment? Exactly, Ellis said. Sometimes we need medicine, sure, but a lot of times our bodies fix things on their own. Cuts, bruises, even broken bones, we can survive them if given time. The avian technician tilted its head. But wouldn't such swelling be painful? Ellis laughed softly. Of course it is. Pain tells us something is wrong. It's our way of knowing we need to slow down and heal. Without pain, we'd keep damaging ourselves without realizing it. Zretha felt her tendrils curl tight around her slate. Pain as guidance, swelling as defense. To her people, both were terrifying signs of collapse. Yet here was a human, explaining them as natural, even helpful. She realized that many of their medical assumptions had been shaped by the biology of species long integrated into the Concord. Humans, so new, had not yet been fully understood. Ellis continued, his voice steady but calm. Sometimes, swelling is part of bigger fights inside us, like when an infection tries to spread. Our body sends fever, heat, to burn it out. Our muscles ache, our heads pound, but that's the body's way of saying, I'm fighting for you. The reptilian doctor blinked, its vertical pupils narrowing. You raise your internal heat on purpose? Ellis nodded. Yes, too much heat can kill, of course, but the right amount saves us. It's not perfect, but it's worked for thousands of years. The staff exchanged glances. For them, heat inside the body was always a warning of collapse. Yet the human spoke of it as survival. The growing respect word spread faster than Zretha imagined. By midday, more staff were coming into the ward simply to hear Ellis talk. He explained in simple terms how the human body responded to cold, how it produced shivers to create warmth, how skin hardened in sunlight to protect deeper tissues, how broken bones could knit themselves back together if given rest. Every explanation challenged what the staff thought they knew. The insectoid physician finally admitted, We believed your species fragile, small in size, soft in form, limited in environment. But now it seems you are made to endure. Ellis chuckled. Fragile? Maybe compared to some of you. We don't have scales, or shells, or wings. But we make up for it by being adaptable. We survive by adjusting to whatever's thrown at us. That's what humans do. Zretha listened quietly, her admiration growing. She thought back to her panic the previous day, how certain she had been that swelling meant death. If Ellis had not stopped her, she might have attempted surgery that would have done harm instead of good. She realized then that the galaxy had underestimated humans, not out of cruelty but out of ignorance. And Ellis, sitting there calmly with his injured arm, was changing that ignorance into understanding. Ellis's story. At one point, one of the avian technicians asked, Commander, have you personally faced such trials before? Injuries or sicknesses where your body saved you? Ellis leaned back slightly, his gaze turning distant. Plenty of times. When I was young, I broke my leg climbing a cliff. Doctors set it in place, but it was my body that knit the bone back together. It took weeks, but I walked again. Another time I was caught in a storm on Earth. Freezing rain, strong winds. I thought I wouldn't make it, but I kept moving, kept shivering, and my body held on until I found shelter. The staff listened in silence. To them, such experiences sounded like survival tales from primitive ages. Yet the human told them not with drama, but with a simple, Honesty. He finished softly. Humans don't survive because we're the strongest or the fastest. We survive because we refuse to give up. Our bodies help us do that, even when it looks painful or strange to others. Zretha felt a quiet shiver run through her. She had seen strength in many species before, but this was different. It was not about power or size. It was about endurance, about a will that even biology seemed to share. The shift in understanding. Later, after Ellis rested, the staff met in a circle to discuss what they had learned. Their voices were filled with wonder. We must update the medical database immediately. We must create new guidelines for human patients. We must not mistake their healing signs for death again. For Zretha, it was more than procedure. She felt she had glimpsed something deeper, a truth about humans that went beyond science. Their resilience was not only in their bodies but also in their spirit. Even when faced with misunderstanding, Ellis had remained calm, patient, even kind to those who nearly harmed him with their ignorance. When she returned to his bedside that evening, she found him awake, watching the stars outside. "Commander," she said softly, "today you revealed to us something important. We thought swelling was a signal of failure. You showed us it was a signal of survival. I believe many will never see humans the same way again." Ellis looked at her with a small smile. "That's good. Understanding means fewer mistakes, and maybe a little more respect." Zretha nodded. She felt her tendrils settle in calmness for the first time since meeting him. "Respect, yes. I believe you have earned it." Closing of Part 3. The ward was quiet that night, but the silence was not empty. It was filled with thought, with realization, with the weight of a lesson that spread from one staff member to another. The human patient, who at first seemed fragile and doomed, had instead become a teacher. Through his calm explanations, he had revealed that humanity's greatest strength lay not in avoiding harm, but in enduring it and transforming it into survival. For Zretha, the revelation was clear. The galaxy had much to learn about humans, and perhaps, just perhaps, humanity had much to teach the galaxy. The next morning began with a quiet hum in the hospital corridors. The soft lights glowed, the machines ticked gently, and the staff moved about their duties as always. Yet the atmosphere around Ward 7 was different. The moment one stepped near the human patient's room, there was a sense of anticipation, as though something important was happening inside. Nurses whispered to each other. Physicians lingered in the doorway, and attendants moved more slowly past the bed than they normally would. At the center of this silent attention was Commander Ellis, the human. His arm was still swollen, but it no longer caused alarm. Instead, it had become a symbol. To the staff, it was no longer a sign of collapse, but of survival. They looked at it the way one might look at a riddle, something strange, puzzling, but worthy of deep respect once the answer was found. The gathering of minds by mid-morning, a small group of doctors gathered at Ellis's bedside. There was the reptilian physician, tall and proud, with scales that shone faintly under the lights. Beside him stood the insectoid doctor, its antennae twitching with sharp curiosity. Two avian technicians perched quietly at the foot of the bed, their feathers puffed slightly in concentration. And of course, Zretha, the nurse who had first panicked, remained close, her tendrils wrapped tightly around her data slate. Ellis raised his eyebrows as he looked at the group. "I feel like I'm on display." "You are," the reptilian admitted calmly. "But not as an exhibit of weakness, as an exhibit of strength." Ellis chuckled. "Strength? I'm lying in bed with a swollen arm." Zretha leaned forward. "But you are calm. You are steady. Yesterday we saw you endure what would have destroyed us. That is strength of a different kind." Ellis tilted his head slightly, as though unsure how to respond. "I guess you could call it strength, but for us it's just normal." That word, normal, sent a ripple of thought through the group. If what looked like catastrophe to them was normal for humans, then what else had they misunderstood? Stories of survival. The insectoid physician clicked its mandibles. "Commander, would you tell us more about your people? What other signs of survival might appear as weakness to us?" Ellis considered for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's see. Sometimes when we get sick, our bodies make us cough. It sounds bad, feels bad, but really, it's just our way of pushing out what doesn't belong. Same with sneezing. Even tears, those drops of water from our eyes, aren't only about sadness. They clean and protect our vision. The avian technicians exchanged surprised glances. To them, coughing was the last sound a dying throat made. Sneezing was unheard of. Tears were unknown. Yet to the human, these were everyday signs of life defending itself. The reptilian physician leaned forward. And when your bodies fail to protect themselves? Ellis smiled faintly. Then we fight with more than our bodies. We fight with our will. Sometimes that matters just as much. Zretha's heart stirred at those words. She remembered his calm voice during her panic. The way he had steadied the entire ward with nothing more than patience. That was not just biology, it was spirit, the quiet admiration. As the day continued, more staff came to listen. Some entered silently, just to observe. Others brought their recording devices to capture Ellis's words. A few even asked to touch his arm carefully to feel the warmth of the swelling that was once feared but now studied with awe. Ellis accepted it all with gentle humor. Careful, I'm not a museum artifact, he joked when yet another technician leaned in too close. But he allowed their curiosity, answering every question with honesty. The more he spoke, the more the awe deepened. Staff began to realize that humans carried not only a body built to endure, but also a mind that embraced challenge. Their biology and their spirit worked together, making them something more than fragile creatures. Zretha's changing view. Zretha remained near him through it all. She had been the first to misunderstand, the first to fear, and now she wanted to be the first to understand fully. She watched the way Ellis explained patiently, never mocking the staff for their ignorance. She watched the way he laughed softly when they marveled at things he considered simple. For her, awe grew in silence. It was not just about the swelling or the healing or the strange immune tricks. It was about the way he carried himself. Even while lying in a hospital bed, he seemed to lead. She found herself thinking, perhaps this is why humans are said to change every place they go. Not because they conquer with force, but because they reveal what others cannot see. The hospital. Records by evening, the Concord's medical database had already been updated. New notes appeared under the section Human Biology. Swelling may indicate protective healing, not failure. Fever, possible defensive response. Coughing, sneezing. Tears, mechanisms of protection, not collapse. Emotional resilience. Patient demonstrates calm under pressure, aiding recovery. These notes were small, but to the staff they felt historic. For the first time, humanity was not written in the records as fragile, but as resilient. The insectoid. Physician announced it formally. We must consider this the beginning of a new field. Human medicine must be studied on its own terms, not compared to others. The reptilian doctor nodded slowly. Agreed. They are not lesser. They are different, perhaps even greater in some ways. The words spread quickly. Staff across the hospital repeated them, carrying the news to every corner. Soon, whispers of respect grew into open admiration. Ellis's perspective. Later that night, when the room was quieter again, Ellis looked at Zretha with a thoughtful expression. You all seem very impressed, but to me this is just life as usual. On Earth, everyone knows what swelling means. No one panics about it. Zretha lowered her gaze, her tendrils curling. But here, we did not know. We feared. And then, you showed us that what we saw as weakness was actually strength. That is why there is awe. Ellis gave a small laugh. I suppose humans have been doing that for a long time. Surprising ourselves, surprising others. Maybe that's just who we are. Zretha studied him for a moment longer. She realized he was not boasting. His voice carried no arrogance. It was simply truth, spoken by someone who had lived it. The lesson spreads. The following day, a group of students in training were brought to Ward 7. Their mentors wanted them to hear Ellis speak. The young trainees crowded in, wide-eyed, as Ellis described once again the strange ways of human survival. They whispered in excitement, their eyes shining as if they were hearing a legend come alive. To them, he was not only a patient, he was a teacher. Zritha watched the students and felt hope stir in her chest. This misunderstanding had begun with panic, but now it was turning into knowledge that would ripple outward, shaping the future. Perhaps one day, when humans became more common in the conquered, there would be no fear at all, only respect. Closing of Part 4A's night fell. Ellis drifted into a peaceful sleep. The ward around him was quiet, but not with tension. It was the silence of respect, the kind of silence given to someone who had changed minds and opened eyes. The swelling on his arm remained, but no one saw it as a threat anymore. They saw it as a lesson, one that would stay with them forever, and Zritha, sitting beside the human's bed with her slate in hand, knew she had witnessed something rare. Awe had filled the ward, not because Ellis demanded it, but because he revealed a truth hidden in plain sight, that humans, though small and strange, carried a resilience that even the greatest species of the galaxy could not ignore. She looked at him one last time before leaving for her rest cycle and whispered softly to herself, "Not fragile, never fragile, simply human." The days passed quietly in the great hospital of the Galactic Conquered. The swelling in Commander Ellis's arm began to ease, the tight skin slowly softening, the volume shrinking bit by bit. The medical staff, who once panicked at the sight of it, now watched with patient curiosity, recording every change. What had begun as confusion and fear had grown into something far greater: respect. Zritha, the alien nurse who had first sounded the alarm, visited Ellis every day. She checked his vitals, updated the slate with careful notes, and, more often than not, asked him questions about humanity. Sometimes it was about biology, sometimes about Earth, and sometimes simply about the way humans thought about life. And Ellis always answered, with the same calm and steady tone that had guided them through their panic: the human recovery. By the end of the week, Ellis could move his arm again without much discomfort. The swelling was still there, but reduced enough that he could flex his fingers and rotate his wrist. To him it was simple recovery. To the staff, it was proof of everything he had explained. Swelling had indeed been a sign of survival, not collapse. The insectoid physician, who had once doubted every word, now spoke openly of admiration. "I have treated countless species, and never have I seen one endure with such quiet determination. Even in apparent weakness you reveal hidden strength," the reptilian doctor added in its low hissing tone. "Humans may not have shells or scales, but your spirit is harder than stone. That, perhaps, is why you live where others perish." Ellis only smiled at their praise. "We're not invincible. We can get hurt, we can fail, but what matters is that we don't stop trying." Those words struck the staff deeply. They had seen species with bodies that could resist fire, ice, or radiation, yet they had rarely seen a species that carried such willpower in its very identity. The farewell gathering. When the time came for Ellis to leave the hospital, the ward was full. Nurses, physicians, and technicians from many wings of the hospital came to see him off. Some stood tall, others crouched low, some fluttered wings or clicked mandibles softly. It was not normal practice to gather for a patient's departure, but Ellis had become more than a patient. He had become a symbol. Zritha stood at his side, holding the discharge slate. She looked around at the gathering and felt her chest swell with quiet pride. Not for herself, but for the lesson they had all learned. Ellis looked at the crowd, surprised. "I didn't expect such an audience." The reptilian doctor stepped forward. "You have changed our understanding, Commander. It is right that we honor you." The insectoid physician added, "Because of you, humans will never again be mistaken as fragile in this hospital. You have given us knowledge that will protect your kind across the conquered." Ellis shifted slightly, looking a little embarrassed but grateful. "I'm glad I could help. Honestly, I didn't do much. My arm just swelled, like it always does. A Ripple of laughter spread through the group. It was light, genuine, and free of fear. The lesson-spoken Zritha finally stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of truth. When I first saw your swelling, I thought you were dying. I panicked, and I nearly made a terrible mistake. But you corrected me. You showed us that what we feared was not death but life. You revealed the resilience of your species, and you did so with patience, kindness, and calm. Ellis met her gaze. You weren't wrong, Zritha. You just didn't know. That's how learning works. We all make mistakes, but if we listen to each other, we don't have to repeat them. She lowered her head respectfully. Yes, and because of you, we have all learned. You have taught us that humanity is not fragile but different, not weak but resilient. This will not be forgotten. The avian technicians fluttered their wings softly in agreement. The reptilian bowed its heavy head. The insectoid clicked its mandibles in solemn respect. A message for the future. Before he left, Ellis was asked to record a short statement for the Concord Central Archives. Standing in front of a small recorder, he spoke simply, without prepared words. I'm Commander Ellis Vera, a human from Earth. Some of you may look at us and think we're fragile. Our skin tears, our bones break, our bodies swell and ache. But those same things that look like weakness are often how we survive. Swelling is not collapse, but protection. Pain is not defeat, but guidance. And even when our bodies struggle, our spirit carries us forward. Humans may not be the strongest or the fastest, but we endure. And sometimes, enduring is the greatest strength of all. When the recording ended, the room was silent. Many of the staff felt something stir inside them. Something they had not expected from a species so new to the stars. It was more than respect. It was inspiration. Zritha's reflection. After Ellis departed, Zritha sat alone in the ward, her data slate resting in her lap. She thought about the first day she had met him. The panic, the alarm, the fear that he was about to collapse. She thought about the way he had stayed calm, guiding them gently through misunderstanding. She wrote in her private notes, "The lesson of humanity is not written in strength of body or power of form. It is written in the ability to endure, to survive, to keep moving forward even when everything seems against them. Humans teach us that weakness can hide strength, and that survival is not always about avoiding pain, but about embracing it with courage. I will remember this always." The spreading reputation. Within days, stories of the human patient had traveled beyond the hospital. Visitors whispered of the man whose swelling arm had turned panic into revelation. Reports were sent to other medical centers across the Concord, warning them not to mistake human symptoms for collapse. But along with the reports came admiration. The staff who had met Ellis spoke of his patience, his humor, and his quiet strength. Soon, the tale of the swelling human became more than a medical note. It became an example of why humans were to be respected. Across the galaxy, humans were often underestimated. But now, in this corner of the stars, they were seen in a new light. Closing of the story many cycles later, Zritha would still remember the moment clearly. The human sitting calmly as his arm swelled, while she panicked. It had been the beginning of her greatest lesson, and she knew she was not alone. The entire hospital had changed because of that moment. The entire Concord would in time, for the truth was simple, yet powerful. Humans were not fragile. They were survivors. And in a galaxy filled with strength in many forms, perhaps the greatest strength of all was the ability to endure and to inspire others through that endurance. Zritha looked out at the stars one quiet night, her thoughts calm. She whispered softly as though speaking to the memory of her patient, "Thank you, human, for teaching us the lesson of humanity.